I'm Kate Tirsh, 32, a documentary filmmaker. The champagne flute slipped from my fingers the instant my eyes caught them in the audience. Crystal shattered against marble, the sound cutting through the elegant murmur of the Beverly Hills Hotel ballroom like a scream. 200 faces turned toward me, but I only saw two, my mother's perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised in that familiar expression of disappointment, my father's steel gray eyes boring into mine across 20 rows of Hollywood's elite. 10 years. 10 years since they'd stood in our family kitchen and told me I was no longer their daughter. Kate Tirsh, accepting the Emmy for Outstanding Documentary Feature. The presenter's voice echoed from the stage behind me, but it sounded like it was coming from underwater. My legs moved without permission, carrying me up the red-carpeted steps, while my mind reeled backward to that terrible morning when I'd packed my life into garbage bags in the rain. Before I go further, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if you're hooked already, a like and subscribe will keep these stories coming. The golden statue felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hands as I approached the microphone. The spotlight burned against my skin, but I couldn't stop staring into the darkness where they sat. Mom wore the same shade of burgundy she'd always favored for special occasions. Dad's hands were folded in his lap, just like they'd been when he delivered his ultimatum about my foolish dreams and wasted potential. "Thank you," I managed, my voice cracking slightly. The teleprompter glowed with the speech I'd rehearsed 100 times, but the words dissolved like sugar in rain. This documentary, Invisible Voices, it's about the stories we're told don't matter. About people who are discarded by the very families who should love them unconditionally. A ripple of uncomfortable shifting moved through the audience. I could feel my publicist's panic radiating from the wings, but I couldn't stop.
Not now.
Not with them watching. 10 years ago, I was told that pursuing filmmaking was a betrayal of everything my family stood for. That I was throwing away a perfectly good pre-med degree for pipe dreams and illusions. My voice grew stronger, steadier. I was told that if I walked out that door, I shouldn't bother coming back. The camera's red light blinked at me like a predator's eye. Somewhere in America, millions of people were watching this moment unfold live, including them. So, I want to thank everyone who believed in invisible voices. I continued, my heart hammering against my ribs. Everyone who knows that sometimes the most important stories come from the people who've been thrown away. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous roar. But through it all, I watched my parents' faces in the darkness. Mom's hand had moved to her throat, that old nervous habit she'd never been able to break. Dad's jaw was clenched, so tight, I could see the muscle jumping even from this distance. I walked off stage on unsteady legs, the Emmy clutched against my chest like armor. The backstage area buzzed with congratulations and camera flashes, but I barely registered any of it. My phone was already buzzing with notifications, my assistant, my agent, reporters wanting quotes about my emotional acceptance speech. But there was one notification that made my blood freeze. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet us in the hotel bar in 20 minutes. Mom." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. 20 minutes. After 10 years of silence, they wanted 20 minutes. The Emmy felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I made my way through the crowd of well-wishers, their voices fading to white noise. In the hotel's ornate bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face and stared at my reflection. The woman looking back at me was successful, accomplished, award-winning. But underneath the designer dress and professional makeup, I could still see the 22-year-old girl who'd stood in the rain with everything she owned stuffed into trash bags, watching her childhood disappear behind a slammed door. My phone buzzed again. 15 minutes now. I touched up my lipstick with shaking hands and walked toward the bar, each step feeling like I was walking toward either redemption or destruction. The Emmy's weight in my arms was nothing compared to the weight of 10 years' worth of questions, hurt, and carefully buried hope. The hotel bar was dimly lit, all mahogany and brass, and the kind of expensive whiskey that my father had always preferred. I spotted them immediately. They'd chosen a corner booth, partially hidden from view. Mom's burgundy dress, looked even more elegant in the amber light. Dad had loosened his tie, the first sign of imperfection I'd seen from him all evening. I approached their table slowly, the Emmy still clutched in my arms like a shield. "Hello, Kate," Mom said softly, and her voice was exactly the same as I remembered, warm honey over steel.
"Mom."
"Dad." I slid into the booth across from them, setting the Emmy on the table between us like a golden mediator. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The bar's jazz music filled the silence, punctuated by the distant sound of the after-party still raging in the ballroom. "Congratulations," Dad said finally, his eyes fixed on the award. "It's impressive." "Thank you." The words felt strange in my mouth. Formal, like we were strangers making polite conversation. Mom's fingers traced the rim of her wine glass. "We watched the documentary," she said quietly. "Last month, when it premiered." I felt my breath catch. "You did." "The story about the homeless veteran," Dad continued, his voice carefully controlled. "The one whose family cut him off when he came back from Afghanistan with PTSD. It was—" He paused, searching for words. "It was powerful." The irony wasn't lost on any of us. My documentary had featured 12 people who'd been abandoned by their families for various reasons: addiction, mental illness, sexuality, life choices that didn't align with family expectations. I'd interviewed each of them with the kind of empathy that only comes from shared experience. "Kate," Mom said, and there was something in her voice I couldn't quite identify. "We made a mistake." The words hung in the air like smoke. I stared at her, waiting for the catch, the condition, the but that would inevitably follow. "A terrible mistake," Dad added, and his voice was rougher now, less controlled. "We were so focused on what we thought your life should look like that we couldn't see what it actually was becoming." I felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. "Do you have any idea what the last 10 years have been like?" The question came out sharper than I'd intended. "Do you know how many times I wanted to call you? How many times I drove past the house just hoping to catch a glimpse of you in the yard?" Mom's composure cracked slightly. "We drove past your apartment," she whispered. "That first year. So many times. But we were too proud, too stubborn to admit we were wrong." "I slept in my car for 3 months," I said, the words tumbling out now. "I worked 3 jobs just to afford film school. I ate ramen noodles for dinner every night for 2 years. And through all of it, I kept thinking that maybe if I just succeeded enough, if I just proved myself enough, you'd be proud of me." "We were always proud of you," Dad said, and his voice broke slightly on the words. "We were just too afraid to admit it. Too afraid that admitting we were wrong would mean we'd lost you forever." The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the bar's entrance. A group of photographers had somehow made their way in, their cameras flashing as they spotted me in the corner booth. Hotel security was already moving to escort them out, but not before several shots had been taken. "Miss Tirsh," one of them called out, "can you comment on your acceptance speech? Are you planning to reconcile with your family?" The questions felt like physical blows. I watched my parents' faces change, saw them realize that this moment, this private, fragile conversation, was about to become public fodder. "We should go," Mom said quickly, already reaching for her purse.
"No."
The word came out harder than I'd intended. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding." I stood up, the Emmy in my arms, and faced the photographers directly. "Yes, these are my parents," I said clearly. "And yes, we're talking for the first time in 10 years. Sometimes families break apart, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, they find their way back to each other." The cameras flashed frantically, but I kept my eyes on my parents' faces. Mom was crying now, tears streaming down her cheeks despite her attempts to maintain composure. Dad's hand had moved to cover hers on the table. Security finally cleared the photographers out, but the damage was done. By tomorrow morning, this moment would be splashed across every entertainment website and gossip magazine in the country. "I'm sorry," I said, sinking back into the booth. "I didn't mean for this to become a circus." "It's okay," Mom said, wiping her eyes with a cocktail napkin. "Maybe it's time for the truth to come out anyway." We talked for another hour, carefully navigating 10 years' worth of hurt and misunderstanding. They told me about the nights they'd lain awake wondering if I was safe, if I was happy, if I ever thought about them. I told them about the small victories and crushing defeats, about the times I'd almost given up, about the moment I'd realized that their rejection had actually given me the empathy I needed to tell other people's stories. "There's something else," Dad said as the evening wound down. "Something we need to tell you." I braced myself, unsure if I could handle any more revelations. "Your grandmother," Mom said softly. "She's been sick. Cancer. She's been asking for you." The world tilted slightly. Grandma Rose, who'd taught me to use her old Super 8 camera when I was 12, who'd always believed in my dreams even when my parents couldn't see them. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, Dad said. "She didn't want us to contact you. Said you'd built a new life and she didn't want to burden you with an old woman's problems." "She's not a burden," I said fiercely. "She's never been a burden." "We know," Mom said. "That's why we're telling you now. She's at Cedars-Sinai, room 412. I looked down at the Emmy in my lap, its golden surface reflecting the bar's amber lights. An hour ago, this award had felt like the culmination of everything I'd worked for. Now it felt like just the beginning. "I want to see her," I said. "Tonight." "Kate," Dad said gently, "it's almost midnight. Visiting hours." "I don't care about visiting hours." I stood up, clutching the Emmy. "I've missed 10 years. I'm not missing another minute." As we prepared to leave, Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. "Kate," she said softly, "can you ever forgive us?" I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in a decade. She was older, more fragile than I remembered. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, gray threads in her perfectly styled hair. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'd like to try." We walked out of the hotel together, 3 people who'd been strangers for 10 years, trying to figure out how to be a family again. The paparazzi were waiting outside, their cameras flashing like lightning in the California night. But I barely noticed them. All I could think about was Grandma Rose, lying in a hospital bed, probably watching the late-night news coverage of the Emmy Awards. Probably seeing her granddaughter's face on television and wondering if she'd ever get the chance to say goodbye. The valet brought my car around, a modest Honda that looked almost comical next to the Bentleys and Maseratis of the other award show attendees. My parents climbed into their own car, a silver Mercedes that was exactly the kind of vehicle I'd expected them to drive. "We'll meet you there," Dad called through his window. I nodded and pulled out into the Los Angeles traffic, the Emmy secured in my passenger seat like a golden co-pilot. The city lights blurred past as I drove toward the hospital, toward a reunion I'd been dreaming about for 10 years. But as I pulled into the Cedars-Sinai parking garage, my phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's main number. My hands shook as I answered. "Hello. Is this Kate Tirsh?" The voice was professional, clinical. "Yes. I'm calling about Rose Tirsh. I'm afraid there's been a development. You need to get here immediately." The line went dead, and I sat in my car in the fluorescent-lit parking garage, the Emmy gleaming beside me, wondering if I was already too late. The elevator's fluorescent lights buzzed like dying insects as I clutched the Emmy against my chest, watching the numbers climb toward the 4th floor. My parents stood beside me in suffocating silence, Mom's burgundy dress now wrinkled from our rushed drive through the city, Dad's tie completely undone and hanging around his neck like a noose. The doors opened with a mechanical ding that sounded obscenely cheerful. Room 412 was at the end of a corridor that smelled like disinfectant and despair. Through the partially open door, I could see the outline of a small figure beneath white hospital sheets, surrounded by the soft beeping of machines that were keeping her tethered to this world. "Grandma?" I whispered, stepping into the room. She turned her head slowly, and even in the dim light, I could see her eyes widen with recognition. Rose Tirsh had always been a small woman, but illness had made her seem almost translucent, as if she might disappear entirely if I looked away. "Katie Bird," she said, using the nickname she'd given me when I was 5 years old. Her voice was paper-thin but still carried that familiar warmth. "I saw you on television tonight. You looked so beautiful up there. I set the Emmy on the bedside table and took her hand, shocked by how fragile it felt. Her skin was like tissue paper, marked with bruises from 4 needles and age spots that hadn't been there in my memories. I'm sorry I didn't come sooner, I said, tears finally spilling over. I didn't know you were sick. Hush now, she said, squeezing my hand with surprising strength. You're here now. That's what matters. My parents hovered near the doorway, uncertain whether they belonged in this moment. Grandma Rose noticed them and gestured weakly for them to come closer. All my babies in one room, she said with a smile that was both joyful and heartbreaking. I've been praying for this day. A nurse appeared in the doorway, a kind-faced woman in scrubs covered with cartoon cats. I'm sorry, but visiting hours ended at 9. I can give you a few minutes, but... Please, I said, turning to face her. We haven't seen each other in 10 years. Can't you make an exception? The nurse looked at my tear-stained face, then at the Emmy gleaming on the bedside table, then at my parents' obvious distress. I'll see what I can do, she said softly. But keep it quiet. The night supervisor is making rounds. When she left, Grandma Rose patted the bed beside her. Sit with me, Katie Bird. Tell me about your movie. I perched carefully on the edge of the mattress, afraid I might hurt her. It's a documentary about people who've been abandoned by their families. People whose society has written off. Like you were, she said, and there was steel in her voice despite its frailty. Grandma, Mom started, but Rose held up a trembling hand. No, Margaret. Let me speak. She turned those sharp blue eyes on my parents. I've held my tongue for 10 years, but I won't go to my grave without saying this. What you did to this girl was unforgivable. The machines around us beeped steadily, marking time like a metronome. Dad shifted uncomfortably, his hands clasped behind his back in that familiar pose he adopted when he was being lectured. She was following her dreams. Grandma Rose continued, her voice growing stronger with indignation. She was brave enough to choose her own path, and you punished her for it. You threw away your own daughter because she wouldn't fit into the neat little box you'd built for her life. We know, Mom said quietly. We know we were wrong. Do you? Grandma Rose's eyes flashed. Do you really? Because knowing and understanding are two different things entirely. She turned back to me, her expression softening. Katie Bird, do you remember when you were 12 and you found my old camera in the attic? I nodded, smiling through my tears. You taught me how to load the film. We made that movie about Mrs. Henderson's cat. Terrible movie, she said with a weak laugh. But you were so proud of it. You made everyone in the family watch it at least 3 times. I still have it, I admitted, on a shelf in my apartment. It was the first story I ever told. And look at you now, she said, gesturing toward the Emmy. Telling stories that matter. Stories that change people's minds and open their hearts. A commotion in the hallway interrupted us. Raised voices, the sound of someone arguing with the nursing staff. Through the partially open door, I could see camera flashes reflecting off the white walls. Oh no, Mom breathed. They followed us here. The paparazzi had somehow tracked us down, probably by monitoring police scanners or bribing hospital staff. I could hear them arguing with security, demanding access, claiming public interest. Ms. Tirsh, can you comment on your family reunion? Is it true your grandmother is dying? How does it feel to be reconciled after 10 years? The questions felt like physical assaults. I watched Grandma Rose's face pale as the reality of the situation sank in. I'm so sorry, I said, standing up. I never meant for this to happen. It's not your fault, sweetheart, she said, but I could see the exhaustion creeping into her features. The nurse with the cat scrubs appeared in the doorway, looking harried. I'm sorry, but you need to leave.
Now.
Security is trying to clear the hallway, but there are more photographers arriving every minute. No, I said firmly. I'm not leaving her. Katie Bird, Grandma Rose said gently, go. This circus isn't good for anyone. I just found you again, I protested. I can't lose you now. She reached for something on her bedside table, a small wrapped package I hadn't noticed before. "I've been saving this for you," she said, pressing it into my hands. "For when you came home." The package was light, wrapped in tissue paper that had yellowed with age. Inside was a small silver locket, tarnished but beautiful, with an intricate rose pattern etched into its surface. "It was my mother's," Grandma Rose explained. "And her mother's before that. I always planned to give it to you on your wedding day, but—" She trailed off, then smiled. "I think tonight is better. Tonight you married your dreams." I fastened the locket around my neck with shaking fingers. It felt warm against my skin, like it carried the love of all the women who'd worn it before me. "Promise me something," she said, gripping my hand tightly. "Promise me you won't let this moment with your parents slip away. Life is too short for grudges, Katie Bird. Too short for pride." The noise in the hallway was getting louder. I could hear security guards shouting, photographers arguing, the general chaos that seemed to follow me everywhere these days. "I promise," I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, my brave girl. Now go, before this gets any worse." We left reluctantly, my parents and I forming a protective triangle as we navigated the gauntlet of photographers in the hallway. Camera flashes exploded around us like fireworks, and the questions came fast and relentless.
Kate.
"How long has your grandmother been sick? Are you planning to move back to Los Angeles? What's next for your relationship with your parents?" I kept my head down and my mouth shut until we reached the elevator. Only when the doors closed did I allow myself to breathe again. "This is insane," Dad muttered, loosening his collar. "How do you live like this?" "You get used to it," I said, though that wasn't entirely true. The attention still felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life unfold on a movie screen. We rode down to the parking garage in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. When the doors opened, I was surprised to see that the paparazzi had found their way down here too. They were waiting by our cars like vultures, cameras ready. "There's got to be another way out," Mom said, peering around the elevator doors. "The service exit," I said, remembering my brief stint working at a hospital during film school. "Follow me." We made our way through the maze of the parking garage, staying low behind parked cars, feeling ridiculous but determined to avoid another media circus. The service exit led to an alley behind the hospital, where the only witnesses were a few scattered homeless people and a stray cat picking through a dumpster. "My car's on the other side of the building," I said, realizing the flaw in our escape plan. "We'll drive you," Dad offered. "You can get your car tomorrow." I was about to accept when my phone rang. The caller ID showed my assistant's number. "Sarah?" I answered. "It's almost 2 in the morning. "Kate, thank God. Are you okay? The internet is going crazy. There are photos of you at the hospital everywhere, and people are speculating about everything from secret illnesses to family scandals." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of unwanted fame pressing down on me. "I'm fine. Just dealing with some family stuff. The studio wants to set up interviews. Good morning, America, Ellen. Everyone wants to talk to you about the family reunion angle. They're calling it the feel-good story of the year." "No," I said firmly. "Absolutely not. This is private." "Kate, I understand, but this could be huge for your career. The documentary is already climbing the streaming charts because of tonight's attention." I looked at my parents, who were pretending not to listen but obviously hanging on every word. The Emmy was still tucked under my arm, its weight a constant reminder of how much my life had changed in just a few hours. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully," I said. "I don't want any interviews about my family. I don't want any publicity about my grandmother's illness. If anyone asks, you tell them it's a private matter and we won't be commenting." "But Kate." "No buts. That's final." I hung up and looked at my parents. "I'm sorry about all this. I never wanted our reunion to become a media spectacle." "It's not your fault," Mom said, echoing Grandma Rose's words. "We're the ones who created this situation in the first place." Dad was staring at his phone, his face grim. "It's already starting," he said, showing us the screen. "Twitter, Instagram, entertainment blogs. They're calling it everything from Emmy winner's emotional family reunion to the prodigal daughter returns. I felt sick. This was exactly what I'd been afraid of, my private pain becoming public entertainment. There's something else, Dad continued, scrolling through his phone. Someone leaked information about your grandmother's condition. They're reporting that she's in critical condition, that this might be a deathbed reconciliation. How could they possibly know that? I demanded. Hospital staff, probably, Mom said bitterly. Someone who recognized you and decided to make a quick buck selling information to the tabloids. We stood in the alley, three people who'd just found each other again, watching our private moment being dissected and commodified by strangers on the internet. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent my career telling other people's stories, and now my own story was being told without my permission. We should go, I said finally, before they figure out where we are. The drive to my parents' house was surreal. I sat in the back seat of their Mercedes, watching the familiar streets of my childhood roll past the windows. Nothing had changed much. The same strip malls, the same chain restaurants, the same perfectly manicured lawns that had always made our neighborhood feel like a movie set. We moved, Mom said quietly, as if reading my thoughts. 2 years after you left. The old house had too many memories. I nodded, understanding. I'd driven past our old house exactly once, about 5 years ago, and had been surprised by how small it looked.
How ordinary.
In my memories, it had been a mansion. In reality, it was just another suburban colonial with a 2-car garage and a front yard that Dad had always kept obsessively neat. Their new house was in a gated community about 10 minutes away, bigger, more expensive, but somehow less welcoming than the home I remembered. The security guard at the gate recognized my parents and waved us through without question, but I noticed him doing a double take when he saw me in the back seat. Great, I muttered. He'll probably call the tabloids before we even get to the house. Mr. Peterson has worked here for 8 years, Dad said. He's not going to call anyone. But even as he said it, I could see the doubt in his eyes. Trust had become a luxury none of us could afford. The house was beautiful in that sterile, magazine-perfect way that wealthy people seem to prefer. Everything was beige and cream and carefully coordinated, like a hotel suite designed to offend no one and inspire nothing. It's lovely, I said, because it seemed like the thing to say. It's not home, Mom admitted, leading me into a living room that looked like it had never been lived in. We bought it thinking we needed a fresh start, but you can't buy your way out of regret. I set the Emmy on their glass coffee table, where it looked completely out of place among the carefully arranged art books and crystal figurines. The award that had felt so important a few hours ago now seemed almost trivial compared to everything else that had happened. Can I get you something to drink? Dad asked, falling back into the role of host. Coffee? Water? Something stronger. Coffee would be great, I said, though what I really wanted was to curl up somewhere quiet and process everything that had happened. While Dad busied himself in the kitchen, Mom and I sat in awkward silence, two women who'd once known each other better than anyone, now struggling to find common ground. I kept your room, she said suddenly. In the old house. For 3 years, I kept it exactly the way you left it, thinking you might come back. What happened to my things? I asked. Storage unit, she said. I couldn't bear to throw them away, but I couldn't look at them either. Your father thought I was being ridiculous, but... She trailed off, then looked directly at me. I never stopped hoping. Dad returned with coffee in delicate china cups that were probably worth more than my first car. We sat there sipping coffee at 3 a.m, 3 people trying to figure out how to be a family again. Tell us about your life, Mom said. The real version, not the sanitized biography they read at award shows.
So I did.
I told them about the early years, sleeping in my car, and working 3 jobs just to afford film school. I told them about my first documentary, a 15-minute piece about street musicians that had taken me 6 months to complete. I told them about the rejections, the near misses, the times I'd almost given up and moved back to Ohio to become a teacher or a nurse or anything that would make them proud. But you didn't give up, Dad said, and there was something like admiration in his voice. I couldn't, I said. Every time I thought about quitting, I'd remember Grandma Rose and that old camera. I'd remember how it felt to tell a story that mattered, even if it was just about Mrs. Henderson's cat. We watched all of them, Mom said quietly. Your documentaries. We have copies of everything you've ever made. I stared at her. You do. We've been following your career from the beginning, Dad admitted. We were too proud to reach out, but we never stopped caring. Never stopped being proud of what you were accomplishing. Then why didn't you call? The question came out more plaintive than I'd intended. Because we were cowards, he said simply. Because admitting we were wrong would have meant admitting that we'd thrown away 10 years with our daughter for nothing. My phone buzzed with another call from Sarah, but I ignored it. Whatever crisis was brewing in the outside world could wait. This moment, this fragile, tentative reconnection, was more important than any publicity nightmare. There's something I need to tell you both, I said, setting down my coffee cup. Something I've never told anyone. They waited, and I could see the fear in their eyes, the worry that I was about to reveal some terrible secret that would shatter this fragile piece we'd built. The night you kicked me out, I said slowly, I didn't just pack my things and leave. I sat in my car outside the house for 4 hours, waiting for one of you to come after me, waiting for you to change your minds. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Katie, we didn't know. I know you didn't know. That's the point. I was 22 years old, and I was terrified. I had nowhere to go, no money, no plan. But I was still hoping that my parents would realize they'd made a mistake and ask me to come home. Why didn't you come to the door? Dad asked. Why didn't you knock and tell us you were scared? Because you'd made it clear that my dreams didn't matter to you, I said, the old hurt rising in my throat like bile. Because you'd looked me in the eye and told me I was choosing to throw my life away. How could I come crawling back 4 hours later and prove you right? The silence stretched between us, heavy with 10 years of missed opportunities and unspoken regrets. Outside, I could hear the distant hum of traffic on the freeway, the normal sounds of a city that never slept. We saw you, Mom whispered suddenly. I froze. What? That night. We saw your car in the driveway. Her voice was barely audible. Your father wanted to go out to you, but I stopped him. I said if we gave in now, you'd never learn to stand on your own. The words hit me like a physical blow. They'd known. They'd known I was sitting there, scared and alone, and they'd chosen to let me suffer. You saw me, I repeated, my voice hollow. You saw me sitting there for 4 hours, and you did nothing. We thought we were teaching you a lesson, Dad said, his voice breaking. We thought tough love would make you come to your senses. Tough love. I stood up abruptly, the Emmy tumbling off my lap and clattering onto the glass table. You call abandoning your daughter tough love? Kate, please. Mom reached for me, but I stepped back.
No.
You don't get to rewrite history now. You don't get to pretend this was some noble parenting strategy. The anger I'd buried for 10 years was erupting now, hot and unstoppable. You threw me away because I embarrassed you. Because having a daughter who wanted to make movies instead of becoming a doctor didn't fit your perfect suburban image. That's not true, Dad protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? Then why didn't you come to my college graduation? Why didn't you call when my first documentary won the Student Film Festival? Why didn't you reach out when I was featured in Variety magazine last year? They had no answer for that, because we all knew the truth. They'd been following my career, yes, but from a safe distance. Close enough to feel proud, far enough away to avoid admitting they'd been wrong. My phone rang again, Sarah, probably dealing with another media crisis. This time I answered, if only to have a moment to collect myself. Kate, where are you? Sarah's voice was tight with stress. The story is exploding. Entertainment Tonight wants an exclusive, and there are photographers camped outside your apartment building. I'm at my parents' house, I said, watching their faces as I spoke. Thank God you're somewhere safe. But Kate, there's something else. Someone leaked footage from the hospital security cameras. Video of you and your parents in your grandmother's room. It's already on TMZ. The blood drained from my face. What kind of footage? Everything. The conversation, the emotional moments, even you putting on the necklace. Someone's going to make a lot of money selling your family's private pain. I sank back onto the couch, feeling like the world was spinning out of control. How is that even legal? It's not, but the damage is done. The video has already been viewed 2 million times. I hung up and looked at my parents, who'd obviously heard enough to understand what was happening. They filmed us, I said numbly. Someone at the hospital sold security footage of our conversation with Grandma Rose. Mom's face went white. The whole conversation? Everything. We sat in stunned silence, processing the violation. Our most intimate family moment, the first real conversation we'd had in 10 years, had been turned into entertainment for strangers. We need to go back, I said suddenly, standing up. We need to see her again before this gets any worse. Kate, it's almost 4 a.m, Dad said. And after what just happened, I don't care what time it is. I don't care about the photographers or the media circus. She's dying, and I'm not going to let a bunch of vultures with cameras keep me away from her. The hospital won't let us in, Mom pointed out. Not after tonight's chaos. Then we'll find another way. I was pacing now, my mind racing through possibilities. There has to be a service entrance, a staff elevator, something. Katie, Mom said gently, maybe we should wait until morning. Let things calm down. Things aren't going to calm down, I said, turning to face them. This is my life now. Every private moment, every family crisis, every personal tragedy becomes public property. If we wait until morning, there will be twice as many cameras, 3 times as many reporters. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it, expecting another crisis update from Sarah, but the sender made my heart stop. It was from the same unknown number that had texted me at the hotel. Mom's number. But Mom was sitting right here in front of me. I opened the message, my hands shaking. This isn't over. Meet me at the old house. Come alone. You have 1 hour. R. Rose. But that was impossible. Grandma Rose was in the hospital, barely conscious, hooked up to machines. She didn't even have her phone with her. What is it? Dad asked, noticing my expression. I showed them the message, watching their faces change from confusion to alarm. That's not possible, Mom said, checking her own phone. I never sent that first message either. Someone else has been using my number. But who would? I started, then stopped as a terrible possibility occurred to me. What if she's not as sick as we thought? I said slowly. What if this whole thing, the hospital, the critical condition, even tonight's timing, what if it was all planned? That's ridiculous, Dad said, but I could see doubt creeping into his eyes. Is it? Think about it. She's been sick for 6 months, but you only told me tonight, right after my Emmy win, when the whole world was watching. And now someone with access to Mom's phone number is sending cryptic messages about meeting at our old house. Kate, you're being paranoid, Mom said, but her voice lacked conviction. Am I? Or am I finally seeing clearly? I grabbed the Emmy from the coffee table, its weight familiar in my hands. There's only one way to find out. You're not seriously thinking of going there, Dad said. I am. And I'm going alone, just like the message said. Absolutely not. Mom stood up, her maternal instincts overriding 10 years of estrangement. It could be dangerous. It could be some kind of trap. Then come with me, I challenged. Both of you. Let's go to the old house and find out what's really going on. They exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that long-married couples have perfected. Okay, Dad said finally. But we call the police first. Just in case. No police, I said firmly. Not yet. If this really is Grandma Rose, if she's somehow orchestrated this whole thing, then she deserves the chance to explain before we involve the authorities. And if it's not her? Mom asked. Then we'll deal with that when we get there. We left the house in Dad's Mercedes, driving through the empty streets toward my childhood neighborhood. The familiar landmarks looked different in the pre-dawn darkness, more ominous, less welcoming than I remembered. Turn here, I directed, even though Dad knew the way by heart. The old house came into view, and my breath caught in my throat. It looked exactly the same as it had 10 years ago, down to the rose bushes Mom had planted along the front walkway. The current owners had maintained it well, keeping the white paint fresh and the lawn perfectly manicured. But there was something wrong with the picture. A light was on in what used to be my bedroom window. "Someone's inside," Mom whispered. We sat in the car, staring at the house, none of us quite ready to take the next step. My phone buzzed with another message. "I'm waiting. Second floor. Your old room. Come alone, or I disappear forever."
This
is insane," Dad muttered. "We should call the police." "Not yet," I said, my hand already on the door handle. "Give me 10 minutes. If I'm not back by then, call everyone, police, FBI, the National Guard if you have to." "Kate," Mom started, but I was already getting out of the car. The front door was unlocked, which should have been my first warning that something was very wrong. I stepped into the foyer, and it was like traveling back in time. The current owners had kept the same paint colors, the same hardwood floors, even some of the same light fixtures. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking in the exact same way I remembered from my teenage years. The hallway at the top was dark except for the light spilling out from under my old bedroom door. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, my heart hammering against my ribs. Whatever was waiting for me on the other side of this door would change everything. Again, I turned a handle and stepped inside. The room was empty except for a single figure sitting in the window seat where I used to read for hours as a child. But it wasn't Grandma Rose. It was a woman I'd never seen before, probably in her 50s, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was holding an old manila envelope and wearing a sad smile. "Hello, Kate," she said. "My name is Dr. Elizabeth Morrison. I was your grandmother's oncologist. And I'm afraid I have something very difficult to tell you. Your grandmother died 3 hours ago," Dr. Morrison said, her voice gentle but unwavering.
Peacefully in her sleep.
"I'm sorry." The words hit me like a physical blow, driving the air from my lungs. I gripped the doorframe to keep from falling, the Emmy still clutched in my other hand like a useless talisman. "That's impossible," I whispered. "We just saw her. She was talking, she was awake, she gave me this necklace."
"Kate."
Dr. Morrison stood up from the window seat, the manila envelope still in her hands. "Your grandmother has been unconscious for the past week. She slipped into a coma last Monday and never woke up." The room spun around me. "But we talked to her. She called me Katie Bird. She told us about watching the documentary." "You talked to someone," Dr. Morrison said carefully. "But it wasn't Rose Tirsh." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process what she was telling me. "Then who?" "That's what I'm here to explain." She held up the envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to give this to you when the time came. She also asked me to make sure you learned the truth about tonight." "What truth?" My voice sounded hollow, distant, like it was coming from someone else. Dr. Morrison gestured toward the window seat. "Please sit down. This is going to be difficult to hear." I remained standing, every instinct telling me to run, to get out of this house and away from whatever revelation was coming. But I needed to know. After 10 years of questions and regrets, I needed to understand what had really happened tonight. "The woman you spoke with at the hospital," Dr. Morrison began, "was an actress named Helen Carey. Your grandmother hired her 6 months ago when she first received her diagnosis." "Hired her?" I repeated stupidly. "Rose knew she was dying. She also knew that your parents would never reach out to you on their own. Their pride wouldn't allow it. So she devised a plan." The pieces were starting to fall into place, creating a picture so elaborate and heartbreaking that I could barely comprehend it. She hired Helen to study her mannerisms, her speech patterns, her memories. Helen spent weeks with Rose, learning everything about your family, about your childhood, about the rift that had torn you all apart. But why? I sank onto the window seat, my legs finally giving out. Why go through such an elaborate charade? "Because she loved you," Dr. Morrison said simply. "Because she knew that if your parents thought she was dying, really dying, in front of them, They would finally swallow their pride and tell you the truth about how much they'd regretted losing you. I thought about the conversation at the hospital, how perfectly Grandma Rose had captured her speech patterns, her mannerisms, even her righteous anger at my parents' behavior. It had been a performance, but one crafted with such love and attention to detail that it had fooled us completely. The text messages, I said, understanding flooding through me. The meeting here, that was all part of the plan too? Rose wanted you to have this conversation away from the media circus. She knew that once the truth came out about her death, there would be no privacy, no chance for your family to heal without the whole world watching. Dr. Morrison handed me the manila envelope. She wrote this letter 6 months ago, right after her diagnosis. She made me promise to deliver it personally, to make sure you understood why she did what she did. My hands shook as I opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Grandma Rose's familiar handwriting, slightly shakier than I remembered, but unmistakably hers. My dearest Katie Bird, if you're reading this, then my plan worked and you're finally back together with your parents. I'm sorry for the deception, but sometimes love requires a little creative storytelling, something I think you'll understand better than most. I've been watching your career from afar, so proud of the woman you've become, so heartbroken that your parents' stubborn pride kept them from sharing in your success. When the doctors told me I had 6 months to live, I knew I couldn't go to my grave knowing that my family was still broken. Your parents love you, Katie. They've always loved you. They were just too afraid to admit they were wrong, too proud to make the first move. Sometimes the people we love most are the hardest to forgive, because forgiving them means admitting how much their rejection hurt us. I hope tonight gave you all the chance to say the things that needed to be said. I hope you can find your way back to each other, not because a dying old woman manipulated you into it, but because you choose to. Because love is always a choice, and it's never too late to choose differently. The locket you're wearing belonged to my grandmother and her grandmother before that. It's been passed down through 4 generations of strong women who refused to let the world break them. You're the strongest of us all, Katie Bird. You took your broken heart and turned it into art. You took your pain and used it to help other people tell their stories. Don't let my death become another reason to pull away from your family. Let it be the beginning of something new. Let it be the foundation you build your future on. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. Grandma Rose. P.S. Helen Carey is a wonderful actress, but she's also a good person. Please don't be angry with her. She was just helping an old woman's last wish come true. I read the letter twice, tears streaming down my face, before I could speak again. How long have you known? I asked Dr. Morrison. About the plan? From the beginning. Rose asked me to help coordinate everything, the timing, the hospital room setup, even making sure Helen had access to the right medical equipment to make the scene convincing. And my parents? Do they know? Not yet. Rose wanted you to decide how much to tell them, and when. I looked around my old bedroom, remembering all the nights I'd sat in this same window seat, dreaming about the movies I would make, the stories I would tell. I'd never imagined that the most elaborate story of all would be the one designed to bring my family back together. She's really gone? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She passed peacefully at 11:47 p.m., Dr. Morrison confirmed. The nurses said she seemed to be waiting for something. Now I think I know what it was. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Everything okay up there? It's been 15 minutes. I looked at Dr. Morrison. I need to tell them. Are you going to tell them everything? I considered this, weighing the truth against the kindness of letting them believe their last conversation with Grandma Rose had been real. Not everything, I decided. Not tonight. They need time to grieve before they learn about the deception. That's probably wise. The funeral arrangements have already been made. Rose was very thorough in her planning. The service is scheduled for Thursday at St. Mary's, the same church where she married my grandfather, I said, remembering the stories she used to tell about their wedding day. She wanted it to be a celebration, not a mourning. She left very specific instructions about that, too. I stood up, clutching the letter and the Emmy, feeling like I was carrying the weight of my entire family's future in my arms. "Dr. Morrison," I said as we prepared to leave the room. "Thank you for helping her, for being here tonight, for making sure I understood." "She was an extraordinary woman," Dr. Morrison replied. "She loved you all so much that she was willing to orchestrate her own death scene to bring you back together. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I've never seen anything like it." We walked downstairs together, and I paused at the front door, looking back at the house that had been my childhood home. So much had happened within these walls: love and laughter, fights and reconciliation, the terrible argument that had torn my family apart, and now this strange, beautiful deception that had brought us back together. "Goodbye, house," I whispered, then stepped out into the pre-dawn darkness. My parents were waiting by the car, their faces etched with worry and confusion. When they saw me walking toward them with Dr. Morrison, I watched understanding dawn in their eyes. "She's gone, isn't she?" Mom said, and it wasn't really a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Dad's composure finally cracked, and he leaned against the car, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Mom wrapped her arms around him, and for a moment they looked like the couple I remembered from my childhood, united in their grief, supporting each other through the pain.
"How?"
Mom asked.
"When?"
"We just saw her. She died peacefully in her sleep," I said, sticking to the partial truth. "About 3 hours ago." "But we talked to her," Dad protested. "She was awake. She was coherent. Sometimes people rally before the end," Dr. Morrison said gently, providing a medical explanation that wasn't technically a lie. "It's not uncommon for patients to have moments of clarity, even when they're very close to death." My parents accepted this explanation because they needed to believe it, because the alternative, that their last conversation with Rose had been a lie, would have been too cruel to bear. "She was so proud of you tonight," Mom said to me, wiping tears from her eyes. "She kept talking about your Emmy, about how she always knew you'd make it." "She loved you both too," I said. "She wanted us to be a family again." We stood there in the empty street, 3 people who'd been strangers 12 hours ago, now bound together by grief and love and the elaborate final gift of a dying woman who'd refused to let pride destroy her family. "What happens now?" Dad asked. "Now we go home," I said. "We plan a funeral. We figure out how to be a family again." "Your home, or our home?" Mom asked, and I could hear the hope in her voice. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw not the people who'd rejected me 10 years ago, but the parents who'd sat in their car for 4 hours, watching me in the driveway, too proud and too scared to come after me. I saw the mother who'd kept my room unchanged for 3 years, hoping I'd come back. I saw the father who'd collected every article about my career, following my success from a distance because he was too ashamed to reach out directly. "Our home," I said. "We'll figure out where that is." The drive back to their house was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded me of the locket around my neck, beautiful and warm and full of promise. When we pulled into their driveway, I was surprised to see Sarah's car parked on the street. She got out as soon as she saw us, her face a mixture of relief and professional concern. "Kate, thank God," she said, hurrying toward us. "I've been trying to reach you for hours. The media situation is completely out of control. What's the latest?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. "The hospital footage has been viewed over 10 million times. Every major network wants an exclusive interview. Your documentary has shot to #1 on 3 different streaming platforms. And," she paused, looking uncomfortable, "there are photographers camped outside the hospital. Someone told them about your grandmother's condition." I exchanged a look with my parents. The media circus was about to get much worse once news of Grandma Rose's death broke. "Sarah," I said carefully, "I need you to prepare a statement. My grandmother passed away early this morning. The family requests privacy during this difficult time. No interviews, no exclusives, no comments beyond that. Kate, I understand you're grieving, but this could be the biggest career opportunity you'll ever have. The sympathy factor alone." "No," The word came out harder than I'd intended. My grandmother's death is not a career opportunity. It's a private family matter, and it's going to stay that way. Sarah looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my expression stopped her. Okay, I'll handle the media. But Kate, you need to know, this story isn't going away. The public is invested now. They want to know what happens next with your family. Then they'll have to wait, I said. Some stories aren't meant to be told in real time. After Sarah left, my parents and I sat in their living room, watching the sun rise through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The Emmy sat on the coffee table between us, no longer the most important thing in the room. I keep thinking about what she said, Mom said quietly. About second chances, about not letting pride get in the way of love. She was right, Dad said. We wasted 10 years because we were too stubborn to admit we were wrong. We can't get those years back, I said. But we can decide what to do with the years we have left. I want to know everything, Mom said suddenly. About your life, your work, your dreams. I want to know about the bad times and the good times, the failures and the successes. I want to know my daughter. And I want to know my parents, I said. Not the people I remember from 10 years ago, but who you are now, who you've become. We have time, Dad said. All the time in the world. My phone buzzed with another call from a reporter, but I turned it off without looking. The outside world could wait. Right now, there was only this. 3 people who'd found their way back to each other, sitting in the morning light, beginning the long process of rebuilding what had been broken. She would have loved this, I said, touching the locket at my throat. Grandma Rose always said that the best stories were the ones about people finding their way home. She was a wise woman, Mom said. She was a sneaky woman, Dad added, and despite everything, we all laughed. Both things can be true, I said. Outside, I could hear the distant sound of traffic picking up as the city woke up. Somewhere out there, photographers were probably still camped outside the hospital, waiting for the next chapter of our story to unfold. Entertainment reporters were crafting headlines about family reunions and deathbed reconciliations. Social media was buzzing with speculation and commentary about our private pain made public. But in here, in this quiet living room with the morning light streaming through the windows, there was only love. Complicated, messy, imperfect love, but love nonetheless. I should probably go home, I said eventually. Get some sleep. Figure out what comes next. Stay, Mom said quickly.
Please.
We have guest rooms and I'm not ready for you to leave again. I looked at her, seeing the fear in her eyes, the terror that this reconciliation might be as fragile as it felt, that I might disappear again if she let me out of her sight. Okay, I said. I'll stay. Really? Really? But I'm keeping the Emmy with me. After everything that's happened tonight, I'm not letting it out of my sight. Deal, Dad said, smiling for the first time since we'd left the hospital. As Mom showed me to the guest room, I caught a glimpse of myself in the hallway mirror. I looked exhausted, emotionally drained, but somehow more complete than I had in years. The woman staring back at me was still successful, still accomplished, still award-winning. But now she was also a daughter again. A granddaughter. Part of a family that had been broken and was slowly, carefully, putting itself back together. Kate, Mom said as she handed me fresh towels. I know we have a lot to work through, a lot of hurt to heal. But I want you to know, I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you. I just forgot how to show it. I know, I said, and for the first time in 10 years, I really did. I set the Emmy on the nightstand and lay down on the guest bed, still wearing my dress from the awards ceremony. It felt like a lifetime ago that I'd stood on that stage, accepting recognition for my work. Now I understood that the real award wasn't the golden statue. It was this. This chance to rebuild, to forgive, to choose love over pride. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about Grandma Rose and her elaborate final performance. She'd been right about one thing. Sometimes love required a little creative storytelling. Sometimes the most important truths could only be revealed through carefully constructed fiction. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, the story had a happy ending after all. The last thing I saw before sleep took me was the morning light catching the surface of the Emmy, turning it into something that looked almost like a star. A guiding light that had led me home. Outside, the world kept spinning. The media kept speculating. The photographers kept waiting for their next shot. But inside this house, 3 people who'd lost each other had finally found their way back home. And that was the only story that mattered.